somebody looked like this, just like you to give quite a low whisper. What is the emotion? What might they be feeling like? It's supposed to be a low whisper. Lovely. They might be feeling a bit sad. If someone was feeling like this, what might their face look like? A bit like you sometimes look when I'm preaching, not really, but a bit angry, a bit cross. And what we're going to be thinking about today is about this story, this Easter story. His story, what's our response? What do we look like and what do we feel like when we hear about the Easter story? Now, children, you've got to listen really, really hard. And grown-ups have come with children. You've also got to listen really, really hard, okay? So first thing, children, I want you to find an adult, preferably the one you came with, definitely one your parents or whoever you've come with are happy for you to be with. And you need to go and grab them right now. So, Ellie, do you want to find somebody? Who do you want to find? Someone nice. Oh, yep, great work. Excellent. Oh, yep. Oh, 2 for 1. You might have to spread out. That would be okay. Has everybody got a grown-y up now that they are gonna work with? Now, what you're gonna do? Put your listening ears on, especially you adults, because we know the children often listen better. What you're going to do is you are going to become life models this morning. Just as you are, you're going to become life models. And what you're going to be is you are going to be 4 of the characters that we are going to be thinking about in the talk. So just a heads up, so you can kind of have your ear open to the talk and your ear listening to your children, hopefully, and something will be happening at the same time. What could go wrong? So the people that we're going to be thinking about is Peter. We're going to be thinking about the centurion at the foot of the cross. Chris is looking really intent, like, I've got to remember this. Thomas and Mary, okay? Have you got them, Chris? Have you got them? You've got them. I feel like Chris is entering a competition right now. Me and Finn are going to be the best. That's what Chris's face is saying right now. What you're going to do is, let me just go and grab one. You're going to choose yourself a face like this, and the grown-up who's going to be really pleased that they've come. The grown-up is going to make the face of the person, okay? So you'll get some clues if you're listening into the talk. So they're going to make a face, children, and you are going to draw that face. So Finn, this is going to be like Dad, and you're going to make this face look like Dad's face looks, okay? So you're going to have to hold your expression, so don't go for something that's difficult to hold. And then you can do 1, you can do 4, you can do as many as you want, but basically you're going to make the face into the face. So how those people responded to the Easter story, does that make sense? Yes, Sarah's nodding. She's nodding. She hasn't got a baby yet to do this with, but so she's fully confident. Oh, you're going to bring Will, are you, to the table? Fine. I mean, it's not just, if anyone else wants to take part, that's fine. So, children and grown-ups, whoever you're bringing, you're going to come over here and join Heather at the table, and there's lots of other craft stuff that can go on there. So, Ellie, do you want to grab this one to start off with? Thank you very much. That's brilliant. So, if you make your way across, that would be brilliant. And we might have a look at some of them at the end. Oh, well done. Kate's carrying her baby there across to the table. If there aren't enough chairs, don't worry. The floor's great. Just spread yourselves out. Excellent. What could go wrong? Nothing. Okay, so don't worry about them. This is them learning. This is a good noise. It means that people are entering into the story in the way that they feel happy. If you're sad you're not over there, don't worry, the over here is hopefully going to be good too. So we're going to be thinking about the story of Easter and our response. Now, you'll be glad, because I know you're a bit sad that you've not got anything to do, so you'll be glad that you do have something to do. So if you've brought a Bible with you, or your phone, or anything that you can get the Bible on, I want you to get it out now, because we're going to be doing a bit of either looking through or scrolling through the scriptures. So we're going to look at 4 different passages, and what I'm going to do is ask you to find it, and then if somebody's willing to read it out, I'm going to ask you to do that. So when you found it, you can let me know, but only pop your hand up if you're happy to read it out. So the first one we're going to look at is Luke 22, 54 to 62. See who can get there first. It's up there, Jen. It's all there for you. Yep. Tim's going to keep his eye out, see who's there. If you get there and you're ready, let us know. Oh, yep. Tal, have you got it? Yep, brilliant. You happy to read it out? You don't have to. Yep, okay. We're ready. We're going to listen. Yep.
Then seizing him, they led him away and took him to the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance, and when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard, and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them.
No, please. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him." But he denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you are talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly.
Thank you very much. So that's the first person that we're hearing about. So Peter's there, and Jesus has already told him this is going to happen, but people say to him, "You were with him, weren't you? You were with that man called Jesus." And Peter's response is, "I don't even know him. I don't know who he is." And so maybe that's where you are this Easter Sunday. The truth is, you don't actually know the person that we're talking about. Maybe you've been invited to church, and you don't actually know Jesus. And the great news is that he's willing to get to know and wants to get to know everybody. And the offer is always there from him. Or maybe, because Peter actually did know Jesus, didn't he? And so maybe you have known Jesus in the past, but where you are right now in your story is that you're not that close to him anymore. And maybe the way that God's saying to you about responding this morning is, actually, I don't know him as well as I used to. But God's saying, that's okay, because you can come back and get to know me again. Let's have a look at the next passage. Well, this is just one verse, Mark 15, verse 39. Have a little look. When you get there, let me know. Tim's got his eyes ready. Anyone there? Have you got it, David? David's got it down here, Tim. You know, we need to keep Tim fit, so he's going to run around. Okay.
When the Roman officer who stood facing him saw how he had died, he exclaimed, "This man truly was the Son of God."
I love this verse in the Bible. This is one of my favourite verses. So here's this Roman soldier. He's at the foot of the cross. He's watched Jesus die. And in that moment, he says, truly this man was the Son of God. He's seen this man die on the cross. He's been part of what happened there. But in that moment, he realizes who this man is and that he's God's son. Maybe that's your response to the Easter story, that when you come to it again, you say, this is God's son. Maybe we just need to reconfirm that to ourselves. Now, yesterday was an interesting day, wasn't it? Because we have Good Friday, and we usually meet together on Good Friday, and we remember all that Jesus has done. And then we come back together on Easter Sunday, and we celebrate. But there's this day in between, Easter Saturday. This is one of my favourite days of the year, because it's the in-between. Good Friday has happened. Easter Sunday hasn't yet happened. and there's this silence. In fact, there's very little in the Bible about this. It does say in John 20 that when Jesus appears to the disciples, it says they were hiding away, they were afraid. When Jesus died, just put yourself back in that moment. Here's his disciples, and they've watched him, and they've watched his journey, and they watch him die. And then they probably feel a lot of things. They probably feel confused. What is actually this all about? They probably feel really disappointed. We really thought this was going to be it, and he's died. They probably, and we know, they felt afraid of what was going to happen to them. And there was a time of waiting in the story. They were waiting for what would happen next. And when I was preparing this message, I felt really clearly that God said, some of us are in Easter Saturday right now. You might be in a situation where you're really confused. What's God doing in the middle of this situation? You might be feeling disappointed that things haven't happened the way that you expected them to. You might be fearful of the future and what it holds. You might be waiting. Some of us are waiting and hoping for things that are to come. And I think that Easter Saturday is so important because in the silence, God says, I don't just recognize the sadness that was at the cross. I don't just recognize the celebration that is Easter Sunday. I recognize the middle part, the waiting, the disappointment, the fear. If that's where you are, this story says, God's in it with you. He's right there with you. Let's have a look at the next one. John 20, verses 24 to 29. Have a little look. If you were at the Christmas service 2 years ago where Heather asked, what's your favourite part of the Christmas story? My dad said, Thomas, doubting Thomas. And we're going to get there, Dad, today, okay? So let's have a look. Who's got this bit of the story? Yep, Paul. Brilliant.
Now Thomas, called the twain one of 12, was not with when Jesus came. And the other disciples therefore said to him, we have seen the Lord. So he said to them, unless I see his hands and the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of his nails, and put my hand into his side, I'll not believe. And after 8 days, the disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them, and Jesus came through the doors being shut. And he stood in the midst and said, peace be to you. Then he said to Thomas, reach forth your finger here and look at my hands, and reach your hand and thrust it into my side, but do not be unbelieving, but believing.
Thank
And
you.
sorry.
Have you got a bit more? Have I missed a bit? That'll do, that's enough. You can read the end. It's all there. It's always there, so you can always go back to it. But Thomas is there, isn't he? And this is, now we're going slightly out of order here. You can talk to me about that after, but it helps for the message. So we've seen Peter say, I don't know him. We've seen the centurion say, this is truly the man of God. We've been to Easter Saturday, and we've seen the doubt and the fear and the disappointment and the silence. And then we're just going to hop forward a little bit, and then we're going to hop back. So at the very end of this bit, we see Thomas, and he's there, and he's waiting, and he says, I am not going to believe this until I see it for myself. So he does a bit of a Victor Meldrew. He says, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't think this story is true. And then Jesus appears, and then Thomas finds that it is true. And I was reading about this week, about how we talk about Thomas in the church. But actually, when we read the story, Jesus says, put your hands here. He doesn't rebuke him. He doesn't say, you shouldn't have asked that question. He says, here I am. And I think maybe that's you this morning. I've heard this story a little bit, but I don't really believe it. And the encouragement is to just find out a little bit more. Just ask God to make himself real. Because if he's God, he can do that, just like he did for Thomas. Okay, final passage. Doing well, people. John 20, 11 to 18. Who can get there? Over here? Excellent.
Now Mary stood outside the tomb, crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead out to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her.
Thank you very much, Mary. So brilliant. So we've gone to Thomas. We're going to come back a little bit, and we're on Easter Sunday morning. And Mary goes to find Jesus. This is one of my favorite. I know I always say this when I preach, but this is one of my favorite bits of the Bible. It's good news for women because Jesus appears, and the women get to go and tell people that he's appeared, and it's good news for everybody. And Mary's there, and she's sad, and she says, "Where have you put him? I just want to see him." And then Jesus speaks her name, calls her by name. And lots of us here have known that sense of God calling us by name in our life. And then she says, "I have seen the Lord." And she goes to tell others about him. I love it. There's a challenge in this, that if we are living in Easter Sunday, and our story is, like mine is, I've known God for a really long time. He's been really faithful. He is everything he says he is. And he died because he loved me, but he didn't stay in Easter Saturday. He came back on Sunday. There is a challenge to us about what do we do with that? How do we tell that amazing story to those that don't yet know? So Easter Sunday is his story, and what's our response? It might be like Peter, I don't know him. And his offer is, well, come and find out. It might be, I don't believe this. Find out a little bit more. There's lots of us that would love to talk to you. It might be he was God's son. Maybe that's the place that I've got to this morning. It might be like Thomas, I'm not sure. And it might be like Mary. But it's a story that calls for a response. So just 2 weeks ago, or maybe 10 days ago now, I got to do what's called a very posh thing, which is an inaugural lecture. So when you get to be a professor, you have to do a lecture that they call an inaugural lecture. And there's this really awful bit of it where when you've finished, somebody has to give a vote of thanks. So you stand there, it's really, really awkward. So you stand there, and then the person who's saying thank you for the work that you've done says thank you while you're standing there. But there's a response to what you've done. And the Easter story calls for a response. The great news for Peter is that Jesus didn't leave him where he was. He met with him again. He made sure his relationship with Peter was right before he went back to heaven. Maybe you want to make sure your relationship is right. And actually, the truth of Easter is... is this, that it is his response that leads to our story. So in the first thing, we see his story, and we say, well, how are we going to respond to that? But actually, what Easter is really about is God responded to you first. When the world was set in place and everything went wrong, and we stopped being able to be friends with God, God chose to respond in that moment through his love. And so I've just written this that I'm going to close with. Easter's story shows God's response to us, love. He came and he died because he loved us, and so that we could be his friends. His story of hope becomes our story of hope. His story of victory over death becomes our story of victory over death. His story of love everlasting becomes our story of being loved forever. The cross and the empty tomb changes everything. We think about how we respond because of this amazing story of an amazing God. And on Easter Sunday, we wonder again at all that he has done, and we celebrate the truth of it all. Let's just pray together. God, I thank you for the truth that is in those words, that our story is because of your story. We thank you for what you did. We thank you that you died for us. We thank you that you rose again. We thank you that we live in that. But Father, wherever we are, whatever our response is this morning, I just want to have a moment of silence for you to just talk to God for yourself about where you are and what your response is. We're just going to do that for a minute.